What if Cooper never left Earth?
Don't let me leave, Murph! No! 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 No!
Let's explore the depths of that world. The dust storms still came. Crops still failed. The sky still dimmed under a dying sun. But this time, the pilot stayed grounded. Joseph Cooper, the man who once touched the stars, now welded rusted machinery in a forgotten shed. He still fixed broken drones, still taught his children to question the world, still stared at the sky with a longing he no longer chased. Because this time, he said no. No to NASA. No to leaving Murph behind. No to vanishing into a black hole in the name of hope. He stayed. Murph never forgave him for wanting to go, but she never had to watch him walk out the door either. Instead, they grew distant in the same house. A father clinging to dusty textbooks and half-built engines. A daughter searching for answers in echoes and gravity. Years passed. NASA kept working, in silence, in shadows. The Lazarus missions went cold. Time kept slipping through their fingers. But Murph never stopped asking questions, and when the answers didn't come, she searched deeper. Equations on her wall, coordinates that whispered, a presence in her room that felt like more than wind. Something was trying to tell her something that never left. It wasn't Cooper she needed. It was the truth. And one day NASA called her instead. They didn't expect a physicist so young. But desperation makes room for brilliance. And Murph Cooper carried both. She stepped into her father's old world with fire in her eyes, chasing the equation he abandoned. And in the darkness of deep space, one of the Lazarus ships blinked to life. A pulse from Edmund's planet. A signal. A chance. But time was no longer on their side. Earth was colder now. Hungrier. The planet wasn't waiting for them to solve gravity. It was giving up. And Murph would have to choose. Solve the impossible from the ground. Or do what her father couldn't. By the time the wind carved fresh scars across the plains and dust once again painted the horizon orange, Murph had outgrown the classroom, the farm, and even her own bitterness. What once burned as anger toward her father had cooled into something sharper, purpose. She buried herself in equations, not to impress Brand, not even to save the Earth, but because something deep inside her refused to accept that extinction was the only ending this planet deserved. The Cooper household, what was left of it, stood quiet on the edge of a dying cornfield. Joseph still lived there. He had replaced exploration with repair, flight with silence. His tools were smaller now, a water pump here, a failing wind turbine there. But his hands had never forgotten how to build, and his eyes still wandered to the stars long after he told himself to stop. They spoke rarely. When they did, it was short, fractured sentences, unfinished thoughts. They moved around each other like ghosts in a place too heavy with memory.
Then came the data. Tiny, fragmented, but unmistakable. A signal from Edmund's world, weak but real. It hadn't come from the wormhole, but from an old relay satellite long thought dead. The Lazarus missions weren't just hope anymore. They were alive. Somewhere. NASA reactivated everything they had. Power grids, launch silos, personnel lists. Murph, now at the center of it all, led the recalibrations. Cooper watched from afar. He didn't ask questions, but he started sleeping less. Outside, the air grew thinner. The crops rotted faster. Towns became ghostly shells. Homes turned to silence. Schools reclaimed by dust. No one knew how much time was left, but they knew it wasn't much. And then the conversation happened. Murph stood across from her father in the barn, surrounded by scraps of metal and starlight coming through cracked wood. She didn't ask him to come back. She didn't need to. He saw it in her eyes, that she was ready.
that she was going, that someone had to finish what he started. The next morning, Cooper watched the old truck disappear down the road, just as he once would have driven it. Only now, it was Murph behind the wheel, leaving him behind, just like he once nearly left her. But this time, there was no blame. Only the quiet ache of love and the sound of engines fading into wind. By the time Murph arrived at launch site Echo, the Pacific winds had already begun to peel the paint from its rusted domes. This was all that remained of Earth's reach for the stars, a skeleton of ambition, half buried in the sand. The site wasn't on any maps anymore. No fuel reserves, no government oversight. But the old servers had power, and someone had been maintaining them. Someone had been waiting. Cooper wasn't there when she arrived. He had left days earlier, chasing a burst transmission out of Jakarta, coordinates that seemed to align with a possible Lazarus drone falling back through the wormhole's tail. He didn't tell her. He didn't need to. She had already known this would be the end of the line, for both of them, in different ways. The data was incomplete, warped by solar interference and near-gravitational flux. But it was real. Dr. Mann's logs had pinged briefly, revealing more than lies this time. Heat signatures, oxygen levels, a biosphere partially stable. The planet hadn't died after all. It had endured. Murph spent days extracting what she could. The noise-to-signal ratio was devastating, and while engineers around her pored over broken schematics and gravitational corrections, she sat with a single question. Would it have been enough if he had gone? Had her father's presence on Earth bought them more time, or simply delayed the inevitable? Back in the Dust Bowl towns where crops curled under a pale sun and school books were used to patch windows, no one knew this question. They just waited. For storms, for rations, for the ground to dry out for good. Entire counties had been evacuated inland. Cooper's old neighbors had scattered, their names scratched out on refugee lists or listed among the unconfirmed missing.
It wasn't until the drone returned that anyone felt hope. Not the Lazarus drone. That one was gone, lost to radiation. But a scout drone, homemade, patched together with scrap and dreams, crossed into the jet stream near the coast and delivered the first full atmospheric scan in years. The poles were shifting, new weather patterns forming. Somewhere in the Canadian Shield, an anomaly was growing. Oxygen-rich, low toxicity, warm enough to support wheat, corn, even fruit-bearing trees. They called it the Ark Basin. The name spread like wildfire. Messages passed hand to hand, maps redrawn, transit columns prepared. The exodus began again, but this time they were going toward something. Cooper came back changed. He didn't speak of Jakarta. Didn't speak much at all. He looked tired. Not from travel, but from the realization that the answers were no longer among the stars. He hadn't gone because he didn't believe. He hadn't gone because he had to be here. For Murph. For Earth. For all of it. In the hangar they sat side by side, staring at the last shuttle shell. It had never flown. But its guidance systems worked. Its sensors still blinked in the dark. Murph connected it to the Ark Basin's grid. It wasn't an escape anymore. It was a new beginning. And somewhere, in the silent corners of his mind, Cooper realized something he'd never dared admit. He had made the right choice. In the weeks that followed, the Ark Basin transformed from myth to mission. Supplies were rerouted, convoys organized. Not by governments. They had crumbled under the weight of famine and fear, but by people. Engineers, farmers, pilots, even former law enforcement, all driven by the same quiet certainty that Earth might still forgive them. Cooper stayed behind at launch site Echo, not out of duty, but necessity. The basin was real, yes, but the path there was perilous. Old infrastructure was failing, bridges collapsed, Radiation pockets flared from unstable weather stations, and no one truly knew how deep the damage to the biosphere had gone. Cooper volunteered to pilot the first atmospheric survey skiff. The man who once trained to leave Earth would now chart its last habitable frontier. Murph objected at first. She was older now, wearier, but not hardened. She knew her father too well. He needed movement, action, purpose, and perhaps a measure of atonement. She handed him a recorder before he left, its memory cleared. A simple request etched into its first log. If you see it, really see it, tell me what it looks like. Cooper flew low. Beneath the jet stream, through ash fields and fractured ridgelines, he followed rivers that no longer reached the sea. He saw wild dogs moving in packs across abandoned highways, birds nesting in satellite dishes, entire towns returned to dust. But then he saw it. The Ark Basin. A crescent of green carved against the backdrop of devastation. Trees, real trees, swaying in the wind. Insects, deer. A stream that shimmered, not with chemical runoff, but with clarity. It was smaller than anyone hoped, but it was alive, unscarred. He circled it once, twice. Then he landed.
He recorded everything: soil samples, wind velocity, microbe counts. He spoke as he moved, narrating for Murph like bedtime stories from another world. It smells like rain before it falls. The trees, birch mostly. Someone planted them, I think. They're in rows, intentional. It's not untouched, it's reclaimed. As the data streamed back, Murph assembled a migration plan. Shelters, hydroponics, water filters. The basin wasn't ready for everyone, but it could begin. And then Cooper went quiet. Not from failure, but from choice. When the second drone arrived, it found him still there. His tent unzipped, his boots by the stream, the recorder full. Murph listened to the final log 100 times before copying it to the archive. Murph, you were always the real astronaut. You stayed, you solved it, and you gave us a second Earth. I just found it. The basin now carries a name: Cooper's Field. It is the first place humanity began to grow again, not beyond the stars, but within its own broken cradle. And that made all the difference. The decision didn't come with fireworks or epiphanies, no dramatic launch countdown, no farewell transmission beamed into the stars. It happened in the quiet, on a clear morning as the winds rolled across the Ark Basin, carrying the scent of new soil and the sound of leaves rustling on trees no one had planted. Cooper stood at the edge of the plateau, overlooking the valley that had once been a wasteland. Below, green stretched further than he could see. The sensors read stable. Breathable air, groundwater surging, pollinators returning. Life, real life, was taking hold. Murph approached from behind. No lab coat, no datapad. Just a woman who had once waited for her father to return from the stars, and now stood beside him, having built a future from the dirt he stayed behind to protect. He never left Earth. And because of that, the Earth never gave up. The Lazarus programs became textbooks. The wormhole collapsed under its own gravitational decay. The colonies that had once been dreamed of beyond Saturn became myth. But here, in a world no one believed in anymore, something impossible had happened. The planet had healed. Not because it was saved, but because it was chosen. The old shuttle frame at launch site Echo was repurposed. Its shell became a greenhouse. Its engines converted to wind turbines. No one needed to escape now. They had stopped looking to the sky for answers and started planting them in the soil beneath their feet. The stars hadn't betrayed them. They had simply reminded them what they almost lost. Cooper didn't return to the farm. The farmhouse was long gone, eaten by sand and memory. But sometimes he visited the place where it once stood, where an old tire swing had danced in the dust, and he would sit with a cup of water and the sun on his face. He didn't wonder what could have been anymore, because what was finally enough. They hadn't fled extinction, they had grown through it. And in the silence between what was lost and what was found, humanity did something no one expected. It endured. If this alternate path through Interstellar moved you, if the idea of staying behind to rebuild struck a chord, consider supporting the channel by leaving a like and subscribing. We explore the universes we love and ask, what if the choices we never made were the ones that saved us? What would you have done? Would you have stayed behind? Let us know below. We read every comment. Until next time, stay grounded and keep looking up.